welcome you to this month's quarterly meeting. We welcome the use of the Welsh language. I have not received any notice that members are invited to speak in Welsh, so today we'll be taking it all in English. Could you also make sure that you switch off your phones or any other device? And if we hear the fire alarm, please follow the green signs which takes us out to the car park opposite the police station. I'd like to welcome everyone, as I just said, and I know Steve Vendel will be making an important announcement towards the end of the meeting. So we'll deal with that when it comes along. So we'll carry on with today's agenda. Are there any item agenda 1 apologies?
I've had apologies from Phil Seaborn and Wayne Tomlinson.
Thank you. Any delegations of any interest?
Chair,
I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any in terms of any members contacting me beforehand, and I don't anticipate any declarations, as the agenda chiefly comprises the update. But can I just remind members, if they do have any declarations, to please record them in the register, and obviously if members have any questions, I'll take them now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. So we move on to agenda item 3. That's the minutes of the last meeting. Starting on page 5. Page 6. And page 7. Could we have some move those those minutes, please? Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. We move on then to page 11. It's, Thursday, June the 30th, 2016, pages 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15.
Just one on
yes,
page
Councillor.
15 for the... Thank you. 4.5 refers to report. Is that cross-referred to the report at 6.2 in agenda item 4, or is it a different case? So it's 4.5 on page 15. Does that refer to the same report as cross-referred to the report mentioned in 6.2 of agenda item 4?
What page number is that, please?
That's page
20. Yes, it is.
I'm sorry, Chair, if you like, I don't think Councillor Jones can second it because he wasn't there, but I can certainly second that. In regarding the panels meetings, I noticed under 7.1 there's a licensing panel hearing, but it's not contained in the report at all, because this was the one dated 003 was obviously on the 30th of June, but under this 7.1 it states that there was another hearing, and that hearing isn't contained within the report.
It's the same one, I think.
No, is it the same? Because if you like, this is to do with the 9 live points, and basically and in regarding the Thursday, the 30th of June, is to do with the domestic. So
This panel one was before the one we've just seen now.
what was it?
Perhaps we had it.
So if we can wait for a response.
Sorry, if you, the one on the 30th of June, it doesn't come in this quarter, believe it or not. It comes in the next quarter. That's why.
This is the 30th of June.
And so is there one missing then, if you like, in regarding the 7.1? Should that be the one which should have been under the report under the 30th of June? I believe that should be the case, because we've only just recently had the 30th of June.
I think that's down to the fact that the hearing was very late in that quarter, and it just wasn't put into the report when it was. This report was written early, started early, and it was missed off because it wasn't. It was a late hearing. That's just an omission. It'll be make sure it's in the next quarterly report.
So we move on to the next item. I think we've cleared up that problem. And I'll ask Simone if she will give us the quarterly report, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair, do you want the questions to be asked as we go through the report or at the end?
I don't mind doing the report. Okay. So the purpose of today's report is to update the Committee on all licensing matters for the first quarter of 2016-2017, this being the months of April, May and June. The recommendations are that the Committee note and comment on the contents of this report. The Committee note the activity report for the first quarter of 2016-17. And that number 3 there was referring to the report that's just gone. So if we could discard number 3. The background is this report to update the Committee on all licensing matters, which includes licences issued in the first quarter of 2016-17 period. Issues and findings, alcohol and entertainment. There have been 9 complaints in relation to licensed premises this quarter. 5 of these complaints have been logged as premises complaints. 1 complaint was in relation to disorder in a premises. Complaints have been received from neighbours of a premises based in Pontypool. The complainant has stated that there was regular disorder at the premises. The DPS was contacted and stated that there had been disorder outside of the pub, but it was not linked to his premises. He claims that the couple who lived opposite had a domestic which spilled out onto the street. He also stated that a gang of men had travelled from a rave in Bristol and had tried to get into the pub by banging the door. He said that he had not allowed them entry. The complainant could not be contacted, so no further investigation was made. 2 complaints were in relation to a personnel licence holders removing themselves from being DPS, and 1 further complaint involved a premises which was found to be operating without a DPS. All 3 complaints were resolved by the licensing officer. All 9 complaints were resolved by the licensing officer by working along with the complainants and the premises licence holders and DPS. Late fees. There have been 4 premises that have not paid their annual fee by the due date during this quarter. 3 premises in relation to licences issued under the Licensing Act 2003, and 1 premise in relation to the Gambling Act. As detailed in the previous committee report, this is a time-consuming task as it involves telephone calls and sometimes visits, issuing notices, requesting payment of the outstanding fees within 7 days. The licence holder is notified that if any payment is not received, the licence will be suspended until such a time that the outstanding fee is paid. In all cases, payment was made once contact had been made by the licensing officer. 5.3, Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licensing. There have been 15 taxi-related complaints this quarter. There have been 8 complaints in relation to taxi drivers. The complaints include a driver swearing in front of his customers, taxi racing each other down a dual carriageway. Both drivers were given warnings and apologised to the complainant. A taxi driver not turning up for a booked taxi test with a testing station resulting in the garage losing money. A taxi driver being given a ticket for using the bus lane in Cardiff, and a complaint claiming that a Torvine licensed taxi driver had been rude and aggressive towards the complainant when they had a disagreement in a petrol station.
On the taxi drivers racing, was that with a paying passenger?
No.
Were police involved?
No. They had been racing at the dual carriageway in Newport. It was 5:30 in the morning. And the new Sainsbury's, the big Sainsbury's in Newport, they were both driving at the dual carriageway there. And someone had noted the numbers on the side of the vehicles and rang to complain. So I spoke to them both. I checked with the operators. They were both in the area at that time. I spoke to them both. Obviously, at 5:30 in the morning, the roads are clear. They thought that they would get away with driving in that manner. But they were both given a warning, and, because they're traceable because of the numbers on the side of the car. So I gave their apologies to the complainant, and he was happy with that.
It is difficult, obviously, because monitoring speed, the person reporting it,
Yeah.
And obviously to monitor whether they are breaking the speed limit or, in effect, racing is difficult then.
They could easily have denied it. They could have both denied it, but they both sat in front of me and felt quite embarrassed. At 5:30 in the morning, I don't think they thought they were going to be seen, but they were. And it's the same as I tell all the drivers, you're traceable, you've got the signage on the side of your vehicle, and people ring and complain, which they did in this occasion, and they both apologised. So I think that is possibly a lesson learned, yeah. 5.3.2, one complaint was in relation to a taxi driver being accused of being violent towards his wife and children. This complaint was sent to Chief Officer for decision in the first instance, and he made the decision to send it to be heard in front of a licensing panel. A brief update is covered in delegated decisions below, but the decision of the panel hearing will be updated to the committee in October's committee. And that was in relation to the point that you brought up earlier, Councillor.
But if you like, that report is the one that's in the report, though, isn't it? Okay. And so that won't be coming up now in October. Then.
No.
That's fine.
We could bring it in October if you prefer. I could discuss the panel meeting hearing outcome then. No? Okay. Would you like me to give you a verbal update now of the panel outcome?
If you don't mind, Simone, we could just do a verbal.
We attended the panel hearing. The gentleman attended along with a social worker, and obviously the complaint itself was quite worrying. But when the social worker updated us on the situation, it turns out that both the taxi driver and his wife are attending courses to try and resolve the issues between them. It seems that there are quite serious issues between them, and police had been called to the premises on a number of occasions, and there was a worry that the children were being involved in the domestic incidents, which is when social services became involved, and it was when they notified us. With all the information that was presented to the panel hearing, the hearing decided that the gentleman was able to keep his licence simply because he had worked along with social services, and they were hoping that in sometime in the future that the family would be living back together as a unit. So they seem to be resolving the issues there. And there didn't seem to be any further issues for licensing, so the panel decided to allow him to keep his licence and his livelihood. And that was the outcome.
The interesting point that I sort of picked up on, it seems to be very woolly with the the main concern, which is whether it's a right and proper person. And there was some case law, obviously, but that wasn't really helping the committee. And it does seem that it's a difficult one. Do you actually put that question to the social services, who are the closest person to that, to ask whether they feel is the right proper person, or would they have no knowledge of that?
I believe that the panel members who attended that panel hearing did question social services in relation to the gentleman and the progress that the family were making, and also the history and the background. And the answers to their questions, I think, reassured the panel at the time that the gentleman was fit and proper.
Could I just say that the social workers didn't turn up for half an hour. I mean, we had to wait over half an hour for their report, which we were disappointed with. But the committee found, we all felt that this was obviously a domestic issue, although none of us support beating up your wives or anything like that. But we found it difficult, to see where we stood. We're not magistrates, we're not solicitors, we're not police, and it seemed to be being dumped onto us to make a decision. He never had received any complaints about his driving and about his job, and everything that Simona said, they were taking counselling, him and his wife, and various things. So we came to the conclusion that we just didn't make a decision. We just said that he was, we were quite happy that that's what was going on.
Just on with the delay was due to well, we don't know what the delay was, but the main thing you were looking at was the report. Can such a report be enclosed with the pink papers in advance in the future, so that if they are late themselves, you've already been able to look at the background report as a suggestion?
Are you referring to the report that the social services? I don't think they've produced a report at the meeting. She represented herself in a verbal fashion. There was no. But I will add that it was a difficult decision for the panel to make, this one. Yeah, it was a very difficult decision, but I think it was the right decision to make at the end of the day. Okay, 5.3.3. There were 4 complaints in relation to operators this quarter. One complainant claimed that she had been overcharged by a taxi driver, and then when she contacted the taxi company to complain, the taxi company then blacklisted her, banning her from using their vehicles. When this complaint was investigated, it was found that the complainant had previously refused to pay taxi drivers and expected the drivers to wait for her as she bought alcohol from local shops, and was regularly rude to the drivers. I was told that she currently owed money for 2 journeys. The licensing officer negated with the complainant, and eventually she paid what was outstanding, and the taxi company allowed her to use their vehicles again. In this quarter, there was also a complaint that a taxi was dirty and smelt of stale tobacco. The licensing officer carried out an inspection of this vehicle, and it was found to be clean, although it looked as if it had been recently cleaned. The licensing officer was satisfied with this, and it was ensured that the vehicle was up to the standard expected. 5.4. Child sexual exploitation and taxi licensing. The final session of safeguarding training is due to take place on the 22nd of July 2016. Only 22 Torvine drivers have not undertaken this course. Letters have now been sent to all drivers advising that they need to book onto the course on the 22nd of July, or their Hackney Carriage private hire driver's licence would be reviewed, with a possibility of the licence being revoked. Updates of any revocations will be given to the committee in October's meeting.
In regarding the numbers of taxi drivers we have in Torvine, could you tell me how many there are? Knowing that even though the wording says only, I believe that 22 is still 22 too many, if you like. So it's basically it's getting in the 22 into context across how many taxi drivers we actually do have working in Torvine.
I believe we have 250 licensed drivers roughly within Torvine at the moment. The figures go up and down, but at the moment it's roughly 250. I was actually very pleased that there were only 22 that hadn't undertaken the course, simply because it is quite difficult. Future courses that, past courses that we've run, it's difficult to get the numbers to attend. So 22 was quite surprising to me. I was quite pleased with that. But these 22 now have been sent letters, and they've been told that if they don't do the course on the 22nd of July, that I will be notified on that day, and by the 23rd of July, they will be suspended. Reports will be going to the Chief Officer. They will be suspended until such a time. I believed we agreed 6 months. If 6 months passes and they haven't sat the course, then they will be revoked.
Yeah, the 22nd of July is tomorrow.
Yes.
So, therefore, we must know who has indicated that they will be attending that course tomorrow, because surely to God we wouldn't be running a course unless we knew that people were going to be present.
There's been confirmations people will be attending.
Yeah, so
the list will be sent to me tomorrow afternoon of people that have attended, because unfortunately people say they will attend and then don't, and then people don't ring to say they're attending and then do. So the list beforehand wouldn't be much use, but I would expect to receive a list of attendance late on the 22nd of July, and then I will be taking actions against the non-attenders.
Perhaps looking at it on a positive side, it looks as if that number may well be reduced tomorrow, and if that's the case and there is still a small number, then I wouldn't hesitate by suspending them immediately, quite frankly, because they've had long enough to do it any blooming way. I mean, this isn't something that they've been asked to do overnight. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, my belief is there's no point in putting deadlines on things and then people being allowed not to adhere to the deadline, because what's the point of putting the deadline there?
Yes, definitely. They will be suspended.
If you would update us in the next quarterly thing, Simone, I think that would be interesting for us all to see the report.
Yes.
Thank you.
And a positive from the training, the next one is 5.4.2. An issue was identified after the safeguarding training had been delivered to taxi drivers. A licensed driver became concerned of the well-being of a 17-year-old female passenger and suspected that she was being abused. The driver used the numbers of the cards provided to them at the training to report the issue. The driver claimed that the call handler did not log her concerns, claiming that the girl did not come under social services remit because of her age. The driver reported this to the licensing officer, who contacted social services to advise of the issue. A training need was therefore identified in relation to the call handlers, who did not realise that social services deal with children up to the age of 18 years old. So we've got two benefits there. We have the training, which is working. People are starting to report issues that they are facing or concerns that they have. And then a training issue was identified within social services itself, in so much as the call handlers didn't realise that they could deal with children up to 18 years old.
Councillor Parish,
Thanks. Yes, I was just going to comment on that. It's good to see that the training is working, and, you know, they did take note of it.
Yes.
The issue about, you know, the age, I mean, you couldn't really, you know, foresee that, could you, anything coming up about that? But it is good that the taxi drivers have taken notice, and they are willing to come forward when they think things aren't what they should be.
Just on that number, and obviously the number called, they weren't aware of the regulations. Is it not the police the first port of call if there is abuse, which can be from, you know, abuse covers quite a range? Is it not a police number, or is it a...
Well, this isn't my area of expertise, but from all the training courses that I've attended in relation to safeguarding, I can say that the lady who ran the course, Kerry Wade, gave out her numbers. She works closely with the police. In fact, I think it's a joined-up section. Social services and the police work together. So Kerry runs the missing children's section. So first point of contact for any abuse, any issues, any concerns that the taxi drivers would have would be that section. And the driver did the correct thing in ringing the numbers that were given out on the cards, and they were the reason why they were given out.
Can I clarify something then? In regarding the number on the card, it doesn't go to Torvine County Borough Council call centre as such?
I believe that it goes
go?
to a social services call handling.
Okay.
Yeah, is Torvine, but is a number specifically for the social services.
Because that is quite alarming then, if like the fact that it's going to specifically a social services number, and yet if like the call handler wasn't aware of the rules and regulations in regard.
It is alarming.
That is something which...
which is why there was a training need identified, and those call handlers have now been trained. So we've got 2 benefits coming out of this training already.
I think at the end of the day, in regarding the social services, that is something basic, I would have thought, as in the age range of a child, the protection or whatever.
It isn't basic, in fact, because most people believe that 16-year-old is the cut-off date. But in relation to if you're making payment via a sexual favour, and if there is an abusive relationship between those people, then it goes up to the age of 18. And that was one of the key points that was offered at the training. And that's why the taxi driver knew that the 17-year-old girl was at risk and that it was against the law what was happening. Okay. 5.5, gambling, gaming and lotteries. The licensing officer carried out 3 visits with the compliance manager from the Gambling Commission. Inspections were completed in relation to local risk assessments, which were a mandatory requirement for businesses from April 2016. The 3 premises did not have a risk assessment in place. The licensing officer will work with the businesses to get these implemented. During these compliant visits, 1 gaming machine was found in a premises in Cwmbran. This machine did not have a permit. The supplier has been given instructions to remove the machine. 5.6, smoking in enclosed public places. There has been 1 complaint in relation to the Smoking Act this quarter. The complaint was in relation to cigarette stubs left outside a licensed premises. The licensing officer visited the premises and discussed the complaint with the DPS, who agreed to put receptacles outside premises for customers to use. Also, Street Scene were made aware of the complaint and a request to sweep the area was made. And I can confirm that that request was undertaken. Also, Street Scene did carry out the request. 5.7, street trading. There are no fresh complaints this quarter. There is ongoing observation and information gathering in relation to unlicensed street traders who operate as mobile traders. 5.8. The licensing officer received a complaint of an unlicensed street collector in Pontypool. A visit was carried out and it was found that the collector was in fact acting as a street vendor. There were no licensing offences committing, as vendors are exempt under the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act. 5.9, scrap metal. There have been no scrap metal complaints made to the licensing office this quarter. Service requests. There are 22 service requests recorded this quarter, mainly in relation to giving advice to customers on application processes. 5.11, prosecutions and appeals. There was 1 prosecution this quarter. A scrap metal case went before the Magistrates' Court for the offence of failing to keep records and failing to produce records to the local authority when requested to do so. On advice from the barrister representing Torvine at this case, the authority withdrew the prosecution. The wording of the legislation meant that the authority needed to prove that the collector was collecting scrap metal in order to carry out a prosecution for not keeping records. The authority could not do that in this case.
Yeah, obviously, my concern is the costs involved, but it didn't go to actual
No.
to trial. However, it was not the prosecution that actually, it's not the defence that wins the case; it's the prosecution that loses it, isn't it? Normally, and therefore you didn't have enough evidence and at one point there to take it to trial. What can you expand on why it was difficult to prove that he was a metal collector?
Scrap metal is a new piece of legislation that we operate under, and there's very little case law to guide us along the way. We have had a successful prosecution previously for this very same thing. It was all trial and error. Like I said, there was no guidance for us, no case law. So the first prosecution we took to the Magistrates' Court. If I just go into detail on how we work, I write out to the scrap metal the scrap metal collectors, and ask them to attend at T-Blind Torvine so that I can examine the records that they keep in. Obviously, as we know, the Scrap Metal Act was brought in to combat metal theft in the area. So the record keeping is quite an important part of this, because these collectors aren't allowed to trade in cash. They have to show that they have a bank account and that all their everything that they sell and everything that they buy is all gone through their account. So we ask to see their records, we ask to see their paperwork, we examine all of that and make sure that everything is okay. Now, we had a few scrap metal collectors come in to us and say that they weren't collecting, but they attended at the meeting after I had sent out a letter and told us that they weren't collecting any further. They gave me written confirmation that they weren't, and that is fine. But on a few occasions, the scrap metal collectors chose to ignore the letters that were sent out. So I wrote out to them on 3 separate occasions, the first time inviting them in so I could inspect their records. The second time, still inviting them in, but then saying that if they failed to attend, that there could be action taken against them. And then on the third occasion, saying, if you do not attend on this occasion, we are going to take action against you. So this was one of those. After he failed to attend on 3 occasions, we then submitted a prosecution file, because obviously they're failing to produce their records to us. The first prosecution we did was successful. The magistrates decided that they had failed to produce their records, and it was a successful prosecution. On this occasion, the gentleman claimed that he had contacted the licensing section and rang and tried to speak to someone in relation to the prosecution beforehand, although we had no record of it in the licensing section. So the magistrate decided from that point that we needed to prove that the gentleman was still collecting to be able to request to see his record. So on this occasion, disappointingly for us, we decided we'll take this on board. It's a learning curve, and we withdrew the prosecution, just so that we could look and try and work out a different way forward, because it is quite frustrating when we write out to people.
I mean, I know it's unrelated, but you send test cases in. You had an incident with an ice cream van, and you sent volunteer 15-year-olds in. Is there a way that in the future that you will, obviously beforehand, test the system with, undercover or whatever, but it's the resources and that, isn't it? But collecting, they go around the doors and do the, yeah.
If we do a test purchase with a taxi, we can ring that taxi and we can pre-book them, and they will turn up at a certain time. These can be anywhere at any time, and we have we have found one or two, haven't we, in the past, but it's a lot of the time, it is just by chance if we go out and we see them. It does take up a lot of our time. This is something that we are considering now, whether we can go out, set a day aside. The most successful operations that we've run with the police. We've run alongside the police. They send out marked vehicles, and then they identify people that we might want to look at, and they bring them in, and they're quite successful. But there is another point that we need to consider, in as much as the cost of metal has dropped dramatically, and a lot of these scrap metal collectors now just don't collect scrap metal. And obviously, if we write out to them and they don't come back to us, then we don't know that. But you are right; it is time consuming, and it is difficult as well. That would be difficult to try and track them down.
Yeah. In regarding the outcome, if you like, and the fact that you've taken on our barrister's advice, what working practices has Torfaen and County Borough Council changed, if you like, to ensure that this doesn't happen again? As in, what amendments, as in working procedures, have you implemented since then?
Well, we've not had any cause to deal with any further scrap metal collectors. It's a new quarter. The quarter that's just gone past has been very busy. We did discuss, didn't we, how we were going to work around this, because obviously we have to inspect their records somehow, and it is a difficult one to try and work around. I always knew that it was going to be difficult inviting the scrap metal collectors in. I mean, a lot of them come in and have said that they were unable to even read the letters that we send out to them. So
you've changed no working practice then, have you?
I've not written out to any, but they are due to renew their licences this year. So I think that the best way to do it is to wait and see how many actually do renew, because I think there's going to be a quarter maybe renewing. And obviously if they come in to renew, then we can update their details and request that they bring their records in then. We will be sending renewal letters out to everyone. We can change those renewal letters to say that if you are going to renew, please bring in your records of your previous collections. I think you've got me thinking on my feet now, because we are trying to work out a way to deal with this, but it is a difficult one, because they are a difficult section of our licence holders to connect with.
Approximately how many scrap collectors are there in this area?
Well, that's difficult to say, because the scrap metal, the cost of scrap metal has dropped so much. It would be a very difficult number. I really and truly, I don't think there's going to be many. I really don't. I think if we left with a quarter, I think we had 35 to 40 before, and if we end up renewing 15 licences, I think that would probably be the higher scale.
Because I know they're out in my area, in the north of the borough, every Sunday.
There are some left. There are a few left, and I think the few that might be left are probably doing a better trade than they did before, because the numbers have certainly dropped dramatically. I know we inspect the sites as well, and whilst I was inspecting the sites, someone came in and sold a scrap car, and that scrap car was sold for £12. That is the cost of scrap metal today. It's very, very, very low.
I mean, it is a multi-million-pound industry, scrap metal fraud, and especially the police really normally get involved when there's some very valuable items, and particularly the railways where and factories that have been disused where there's copper involved in wiring. Copper really hasn't dropped that much, and that probably is where their efforts are going to be more concentrated, rather than just your everyday fridges and cars and that, which have next to no value whatsoever, as you've alluded to. So with the feedback from the police then, is there is there the scrap metal for copper, people's boilers, things like that? Are they still quite attractive items? And has there been any decrease in that particular side of the illegal industry?
I think the most attractive item, and the thing that I've gone out and travelled around the scrap metal sites with the police to discuss, are catalytic converters. They're the only thefts that are reported through to us at the moment, and there hasn't been one of those for quite a while. The police do report any metal theft to us, and the last metal theft was catalytic converters. And I worked along with the police then, and we visited every scrap site in Torfaen, just to update them, just to question, just to show our face really, so that, you know, they knew that we were aware of what was going on. That was a few months back. I've not been given any information from the police since then. Do you have anything to update on that, Steve?
The only thing, you mentioned the railway property, the only police that are really pushing about scrap metal now is British Transport Police, because they are, especially with the electrification of the South Wales line, they're still being hit with thefts on the South Wales line. And the main push now with regards to metal theft, Gwent Police have told us at the last meeting that they're getting, basically it's not high priority for them anymore. They're not getting the manhole covers and everything else stolen. Say the precious metal and catalytic converters, which actually, you know, that's why they're going for that. But the British Transport Police are the only police now who are taking this on and taking it seriously, to be fair.
Thank you. Shall we move on to delegated decisions? Okay, 6. Delegated decisions. There have been 2 delegated decisions made this quarter. The one decision was in relation to a licensed driver who had been granted a 6-month licence, and the panel requested that full licence be granted if no problems had occurred. The driver was granted a further 6 months on his licence by the Chief Officer. 6.2. A delegated decision report was presented to the Chief Officer in relation to a taxi driver who had been accused of being violent towards his wife. Social services had been contacted. The licensing officer had requested that they attended a statutory meeting. The information shared at this meeting was of a concern in nature. A report containing the information was presented to the Chief Officer, who made the decision to request the driver attended at a licensing panel, and that is the case that we've already discussed. Licensing panel hearings. There have been 1 taxi panel hearing this quarter. The panel hearing was in relation to a taxi driver who had accumulated 9 live points on his DVLA driver's licence. The panel reviewed the information given to them at the licensing hearing and made the decision to allow the driver to retain his Hackney Carriage private hire driver's licence. Licensing team performance. The team performance plan is attached. The activity report for the licensing team is attached at Appendix A. There is little to discuss at this early stage of the period. The team continue to be very busy and are ensuring the service to the public is provided to a high standard. Would you like to refer to the activity plan? Yes? As you can see, we are on target for most things. It's much healthier than this time last year. Okay to move on? Collaboration between Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen. The collaboration is moving along and officers are adjusting to working as part of a larger team. There has been some joint working and this will increase as the collaboration progresses. There are forthcoming management changes due to the collaboration. Steve Bendel will give a verbal update at the quarterly committee hearing.
Sorry, this is just a general question in regarding Appendix A, if you like. I don't want to go into the into too much detail. last year we had an awful lot of targets which were not met, if you like. And so in regarding the targets here, I can't see any or that many targets. And so has the service looked at reducing the targets for this year, increasing them or keeping them the same?
We were an officer down last year, if you remember. We had one of our officers, she's had a baby. So this time last year we were quite short, wouldn't we, on staffing. And we were always busy with complaints. Things needed to take priority. The public take priority. So we dealt with the complaints first and then fitted in as many inspections as we could. But if you refer back to the committee hearing before, then the activity report at the end of that year was actually very healthy. We were very, very hard to catch up. You will find, if you look at the report, that the taxi inspections are down a little bit. And that is simply because I had a joint working booked in with the police towards the end of June, where lots of these inspections are carried out, and that would have boosted the figures and we would have been on target. Unfortunately, the police are quite short-staffed, and the officer that I was due to work with cancelled the day before, so I was unable to carry out those inspections. But I have booked in a few days now in the next coming weeks to catch up with those inspections.
And so in regarding the targets, have they been kept the same for this year, yes, or have they increased, or they been kept?
They're exactly the same.
But because of the collaboration, I would imagine, as well.
Which ones have decreased?
Most of them. I have to say, I've just looked at this now, and I'm afraid that the service improvement plan figures that are on here don't match the service improvement plan that we have at the moment. I just realised this wasn't updated when we updated the service improvement plan, so we need to amend that, and that will have to be done at the next meeting.
But the inspections that have been carried out are on target.
Well, yes, but you may find that some of these figures will be different. The actual targets will be different. But these are last year's targets, and we're achieving last year's targets.
No, that mainly because of the collaboration, would you say?
No.
The percentages have been, the percentages are exactly the same, and they've been changed along with the number of licences that we have on our system at the time. So, for example, if we were doing 80% of something last year with 50 licences, and now this year we've got 52, all those percentages have been updated.
Looking at the collaboration between Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen, in the future, say if you had got somebody on maternity leave or excuse me, or long-term sickness, would the collaboration help? You know, could you call on any resources from Blaenau Gwent to help out in Torfaen?
I
Is
mean,
that likely?
Hopefully a little bit of help, but you know, both teams are quite stretched, aren't they?
I think there is a difficulty with the collaboration as far as licensing is concerned. The collaboration between public protection has been a success, and the joint working has been quite successful, and as you know, it's moving forward into other areas now. The difficulty with licensing is it works differently to the rest of the public protection service, and we have so many things which are barriers to working totally together, and that is an issue. Some of them are HR reasons, to be fair, where we have totally different structures, job descriptions, job responsibilities, etc. And as it stands with the way the collaboration is at the moment, we're unable to change those. It would have to be a merger with a 2P arrangement in order for that to change. So whilst we are working together and we're trying to share resources, particularly on the proactive side, as far as the office-based side is concerned and the reporting to committee is concerned, that cannot change. So from my perspective as the team leader, I'm not sort of managing one big team. I'm managing two teams with a little bit of shared working. Does that make sense? So it is more difficult for us to cover in those circumstances. And to be fair, most of the enforcement resources at this end, not in Blaen y Gwent, I've only got one enforcement officer in Blaen y Gwent, whereas I've got two down here. So the fact that Claire went off on maternity leave, you know, and we were down to our bones anyway with loss of staff through redundancy, it did make it very difficult last year. But all credit to Claire and Simone, who, when Claire came back towards the end of the year, they worked hard, and by the end of the reporting year, they actually achieved most of the targets, or certainly achieved them to a percentage which was more than satisfactory, much more than satisfactory. So it is a difficult thing when we're down on resources anyway. But the collaboration, if I could go on to the collaboration, as I said, it is not as easy for licensing as it is for everywhere else. It has been a positive, and you would have heard the two solicitors saying yesterday about how positive it's been with regards to Torfaen and Blaen y Gwent collaborating. We've done a lot of work bringing things closer together. There's still a lot of work to do. You saw the business plan that we produced at the last meeting. Some of the things on that business plan, like the HR stuff with bringing the teams closer together, although it was approved at the last meeting, I've since had meetings with HR and I've been told I can't do it under HR rules. So there are some hurdles to overcome, should I say. They're not insurmountable, but they are hurdles to overcome. But I think generally it is positive in general terms. It's just as from a management side of things, there is a lot of work to be done. As far as operationally is concerned, we've already got consistent policies with the Licensing Act and Gambling Act. We're working on the taxi licensing policy now to have something fairly consistent, not exactly the same, but consistent. And we've been working on the street trading policy to get that consistent as well. So those are the four main policy areas. We'll also be looking at procedures, etc. And it's a shared learning experience, because there are things in Blaen y Gwent which I like, which we can learn from, and vice versa. There are things that we're taking up to Blaen y Gwent which they're appreciative of. One of the things that we've done as part of the collaboration is we started doing joint training, in particular joint member training, and those of you who attended yesterday will know that we had both Blaen y Gwent and Torfaen training up there yesterday, and recently there was a training session over at USC for all licensing committee members in Gwent to do the safeguarding training. I have to say that I was disappointed on both of those occasions with the turnout of members from Torfaen. Very disappointed. It is a very important matter that licensing committee members are trained. It's been training of members and has been criticised nationally. Another council in the UK has just had an audit report which has criticised the licensing processes. And it is one of the things that's coming up all the time is the training and consistency of members. So all I would say to you is please, when there is licensing training booked, please make every effort to attend, because it could put us at risk, because the lawyers are now getting the wind of the fact that members should be trained if they're going to be sitting on a decision-making panel. And if they're getting wind of that, they start asking questions about whether members have been trained, then could well undermine us in court if we have appeals. So that's from that side of things anyway.
I think we need to identify if, like, I attended the training yesterday, and it was extremely good, if you like. But there's a difference between trained and being retrained, if you like. And so basically, I think we've got to differentiate the two there, if you like. If we've got a new person coming onto the committee, if you like, yes, they would need to be trained. However, then, if you like, for the experienced members, they might need to be retrained. And because it's retrained, that might need to be a bit more specific in regarding updated information, instead of doing the whole course again. And there's a difference there, if you like, especially when it comes to when it comes to the protection of vulnerable adults, because that's a topic in which it basically we can get additional training from other parts and other departments as well. And so as opposed to specific licensing training, if you like, then I think you should get more support specifically when it comes to licensing. But that's my thoughts.
Can I just say, Chairman, I thought yesterday's training session was excellent. Yeah. It was really good. It was done in bite-sized pieces, shall we say, and I enjoyed it. And if you enjoy a training session, you know you've learned something. You know, it was worthwhile. And it is a shame that more members didn't attend, because I don't think you ever know everything about licensing or any subject for that matter, and it's good to have these training sessions every now and again anyway, to keep us a bit sharper.
Can I say about the training that took place over at Monmouthshire County Council? On that particular day, there was a training session over at Monmouthshire County Council. In the afternoon, an almost identical training session was at Mount Pleasant Hall in Pontnewydd. Now, based upon that, members of the licensing committee and the other committees that were expected to be out all day, attending training, which was coterminous with each other. Now, yesterday, training was held up in Blaenavon. Councillor Mrs. Parish attended. I attended the other meeting that both Councillor Mrs. Parish and myself had to attend as well. You can't be in two places at the same time. Now, fortunately, yesterday, which Councillor Mrs. Parish doesn't know this, we were just quorate in the other meeting yesterday. Now, just imagine if that meeting had not taken place, then my morning would have completely been wasted, because we couldn't have done anything there, and because I'd taken the option to attend that one, I wouldn't have attended the other one, so nothing would have happened. Now, what I find myself at the end of the day, and I've expressed concern about this, people need to be looking at corporate diaries to see where people are. And at the end of the day, you can't be in two places at the same time. So I think with regard to the training year and the comment just made about that this may present a problem when matters come to court, then I think that the training year needs to take priority, because there is a massive impact upon, as Councillor Michael over there turned around and Councillor Harris said, that about the costs when you're engaging barristers. They don't come at £0.50 an hour, for goodness sake. So if it's going to have a big impact upon things, then we've got to look at how we go about the training applications. I appreciate the difficulties that officers will find themselves in, and we collaborate now with two councils, in fact probably more than that, and we've got to look at that how people have. Somebody suggested to me on another situation, unrelated, but nevertheless still in line with safeguarding, if you don't do this and you don't do that, you'll be suspended. I said, right, great, marvellous, carry on, let me know when I've got to finish. Because you can't be in 2 or 3 places at the same time. And some of that is not being taken into account. So I think that the key to it all is that if this training is as important as it seems that it is, then we need to isolate that training so as that the members can actually attend.
If I could respond to the comments that have been made, both points I take are valid points from with regards to the difficulties, and I accept those difficulties. I never expect everybody to turn up at every training session. It's just not possible. All I will say is that obviously the logistics of trying to arrange these things are quite difficult, and as Councillor Brooks has just said, trying to arrange this for 2 councils, it was a nightmare trying to get everybody, including the 2 solicitors who came along to deliver the training. All I will say is, yes, if it can be isolated, I think that this is where I'm going here. It's not so much a criticism of members not turning up, as we need to look at how we look at this in the light of what's going on. And, like I say, taking on board what Councillor Brooks said about the 2 training sessions that day, they would have been very similar in some respects, but they wouldn't have been similar when it came to licensing committee. And that's where the difference. I don't know if any of you attended both sessions and could do a comparison on that, but they would have been different because the session you did in Cwmbran would have not have covered the licensing aspect. So, Councillor Parish, I see you note.
I did attend both sessions. I was out all day. And, yeah, licensing, it is unique. You can't, it was all about safeguarding, yes, but licensing, as you say, is unique. And the session in the afternoon had a completely different slant on it anyway. So I didn't think I'd wasted my time. But, I mean, I do agree with my colleague. It is difficult to prioritise sometimes. And that's what we have to do, prioritise. And that's all we can do.
Yeah, as I said, I didn't want this to come over as a criticism of members so much, but both sessions, it was obvious that we were well down on figures, and it's something we need to look at how we do this in future to ensure that we get the representation from this licensing committee, and that's something that we may need to discuss with the democratic services, etc., to see how we arrange these in future. Yeah.
Chair, I make the point that I wasn't having to go to anybody or anything. I was just making a point as to where we are at. The elected members across the piece, that's everything today. There is, it seems to, that I've spent the last 4 years just training on something or other all of the time. And, you know, in point of fact, I was a fairly senior person where I worked before, and I'd done more training here as an elected member than I've ever done in my professional career. And sometimes I my God, what the hell am I doing here again? Like, you know. But the thing about it is, at the end of the day, I think that the point that I was making is, and it was based upon the comment about that it may impact upon us when it comes to a court case. Well, I think that we have a duty. We've got to make sure that doesn't happen. And so I think that that's the point I make. I accept that that point has been taken on by the lead officer on this, and I think that's so important that we must make sure that that element of it is that we cover it, and we have a clear understanding of that, because the cost implications of that I mean, the kitty is a bit low as it is, without sort of spending money that then it effectively becomes wasted.
Okay. Chair, as much as I love licensing, due to circumstances cannot be avoided. Therefore, I give my apologies. Thank you. Perhaps in the future we can have second training. Thank you. Online, that's right.
I think it will be, we will have to put something else on. I think that's inevitable following the training, the sessions we've had. How that's going to be achieved now, because we're coming through the summer period, etc. And I think my next bit that I'm about to talk about is who is going to achieve it as well, because the next bit I'm going to talk about the forthcoming management changes that are mentioned in the report. The forthcoming management changes is due to the continuation of the collaboration. Some of you will already know this, some of you won't. But the fact of the matter is there's more managers than posts. And I am retiring this year, and I'll be finishing. my last working day will be the 26th of August. So my post has been terminated on the 30th of September, but with annual leave I'll be finishing on the 26th of August. So that's one of the management changes, and what's happened is there's been a management reorganisation report gone in following the Cabinet's approval of the furtherance of the collaboration, and that report is basically reorganising the management with those who want to go and those who don't want to go. So, because I'm getting old now, and the other managers were a lot younger than me, it was only, it was common sense for me. It's my time, and so I will be finishing, and your replacement will be the current food safety manager, Alison Hughes, who I think many of you will know anyway. So she will be taking over my post as licensing team leader. So that is the management change which is coming into effect. So that's basically, this will be my last licensing committee. Bye-bye.
May I say all the best and enjoy your retirement. We will miss you here. Thank you.
Perhaps I could comment then as well with regard to that, and turn around and say, when you retire, you will naturally expect to have time to yourself. Well, if you do, perhaps you could give me a ring and let me know how you will have achieved it. Because I simply been working longer hours now since I retired than what I was when I was working.
Yeah, just about, Chair. Monitoring and evaluation, the licensing team will continue to review its operating procedures and all policies to ensure that the authority delivers the best service to the public. And the conclusion is that the team are dealing with complaints and service requests on a priority basis, as well as a number of delegated decisions and prosecutions. And I'm just going to, if I can, go back to Councillor Parish's comment, where she said in future, if you have a staff shortage in relation to maternity leave, and I can guarantee Councillor Parish that is never going to happen in our team again. And I think Claire will back me up on that comment as well. So that's the end of my report, Chair.
Thank you, Simone. Well, members, page 21 is the recommendations. On item 13, 13.1, that the committee note the comments of the context of the report, that the committee note the activity report for the first quarter of 2016-17, that the committee note the activities of the report for the annual general period 2016-2017.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. And on that point, I will close the meeting. Although I would like to pay my own bit of respect to Steve. Steve came into licensing, and he actually turned this department around, because when Steve first arrived, there were big issues. I was chairman of planning at the time, and the chairman of planning would have to deal with the licensing as well. The licensing change came in, whereby smoking bans and all the other things with the pubs and clubs, and we were down here something like 5 days a week, 3 or 4 meetings a day. I did actually make an appointment with the leader, and I did recommend that to be in charge of planning and licensing was far too much work for one person. So we introduced the licensing, planning and licensing, and I was chairman at the time, and Steve came in, and it was as Simone and all will tell you, that they used to be really interested here in. We had meetings sometimes with the public of 50 or 60 people in here. One in particular was about Blenavon, and there was we were tipped off that an ex-policeman would start talking, and they never stopped. Well, you know what ex-policemen are like. Steve's one. So we decided we had a plan of action, and we ambushed them, if you remember, Steve. I said, well, the best way we can do for these people is we made it properly official. And we all sat up here in different offices, and it was like going into a court, Steve is. And believe me, it really does work. These people, they just sat there, and then the ex-policeman did start to try to interfere, and we was stopped, and we said, and it used to be really exciting times, if you remember, Steve. And we had many of those with 50 or 60 people here, all objecting about one thing or another. But I have to say that Steve has really turned this licensing department around. I think most people in Wales look at Torfaen and try to copy our standards, and I think it's all due to Steve and his team with Simone and all the rest of them. So I'd like to wish you a happy retirement, Steve.
Thank you, Chair.
Don't get too drunk, unless you call me with it. And like I said, I hope Simone will be staying here with us to steady the ship. We just keep our fingers crossed, And but I'd like to thank you, Steve, on behalf of everyone from the council, from Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent, for the wonderful, outstanding job you've done. Thank you very much.